Well, the Inquisition. Its very name immediately brings to mind one of the darkest eras of the Catholic Church in Western Europe, where those who are perceived as heretics were hunted out, placed on trial, tortured, imprisoned, and often put to death, typically by being burnt at the stake, but through other cruel methods as well. Beginning in 1184, and continuing with the fury into the 12, 13, 14, 1500s in Spain and Portugal, the Inquisition attempted to end theological innovation, to stop believed attacks by the devil, and especially silence what was often called free thinking via their well-organized methodology of intimidation and terror. But the modern world was rising, and as much as this institution attempted to end divisions in the church and end open expression, with every one group suppressed, another arose, until the number of those who joined, for example, the Protestant Reformation, overwhelmed its ability to keep up and eventually diminished its power. In this lecture, we will not only hear stories from the perspective of the inquisitors, but also the beliefs of those they tried to silence, and in some cases, silenced successfully. We will learn about the beliefs of the mysterious dualistic Cathars. We'll be learning about the Waldensians. We'll be learning about the spiritual Franciscans, the Knights Templar, and the Beguines, which, by the way, is part of an all-female mystical movement. We will learn about those who are deemed as witches and the persecution of the Jews in Spain. We're going to go over all of this. It's quite a bit. What I decided to do is going through putting together this talk. I mean, after a while, if you read about the Inquisition, it's very methodical. But after a while, I'm not going to say it's dull, because it's not dull. But after a while, kind of grinds you down. So I want to make sure that I peppered it up. And it's important to know what the Inquisition was trying to suppress. I think that's an even more interesting idea. All right, I want to go there with that. So follow me, if you will. Now, while trials against those perceived as heretics had already been part of the policy of the Catholic Church by the Middle Ages, what we officially know as the Inquisition as an institution began in France in the 12th century. Before this time, individuals or groups expressing ideas counter to the doctrines of the Catholic Church were brought to trial. They were charged as heretics and received various punishments, from required penances to be followed, to excommunication, to imprisonment, sometimes for years. However, it's a big however. With that said, these trials involved no torture, and the verdict was hardly ever death. Okay, so I don't want you to get in your minds that these kinds of policies are going back further. It is going on sporadically, but nothing is systematic. With this said, some countries would then move these charged heretics into a civil court, and here torture and death was sometimes the result. And again, with that said, these actions and verdicts did not officially involve the church in this case. But when does the Inquisition, as we know it as a structure, begin? It began in 1184 in Languedoc, France, against those known as the Cathars. It wasn't as systematic at first. It was, in fact, they called this the Episcopal Inquisition. And so what happens is it was administered by the local bishops of the southern part of France to deal with the Cathars. However, the next phase of the Inquisition started around 1208. Now, and the reason why is because of a believed heretical sect known as the Albigensians, also known as the Cathars. And they were becoming popular, you want to use such a word, in France and Italy, and the church became very concerned. They received various warnings to reform, but instead of changing their ways, as the church wanted, they began to openly defy papal authority, specifically the authority of Pope Innocent III. So let's go to the first picture. Let's take a look at old Pope Innocent III. Let's see here. Pope Innocent III there he is, yeah. This is he was Pope from 1198 to 1216. And so what's going to happen is the Pope will then send Dominican monks to try to convince the Cathars to change their ways. When that didn't work, Innocent III attempted to get Raymond the Sixth, Count of Toulouse, to contain the insubordinate Cathars. Events did not go as planned, however, with the result that the representative of the Pope, a certain Pierre, was mysteriously murdered in 1208. And to make matters worse, the Count suddenly found himself as the main suspect. So to deflect this embarrassment, the papacy and Innocent III zealously launched the Cathar Crusade the very next year in 1209, with 30,000 laying waste to the entire Languedoc region in the south of France. To help entice the soldiers to fight with all their strength, the Pope offered indulgences to all its participants, just like any other Christian crusade. Desperate, the Cathars fled to those sympathetic to their plight, for instance, to the people like Ramon Roger Trevaux, who gave them sanctuary within Carcassonne's majestic city fortress. But ultimately, one by one, those harboring the Cathars found themselves defeated by Simon de Montefort's forces. Let's go to the next picture. Okay, this is Béziers. This is, of course, what happens in the year 1204. French soldiers of Simon de Montfort swept into the fortified town of Béziers. And what they did, go to the next picture, is there was a massacre of 20,000 citizens right on the spot. This is not to say that the soldiers did not torture their victims first, including blinding and mutilation, followed by dragging them behind horses and using them for target practice. In desperation, some fled to a nearby church, hoping to find sanctuary there. Unfortunately, they were dead wrong. Within moments, the building was torched and engulfed in flame. Outside, the soldiers just stood there in full repose, confident in their righteousness, as men and women and children shrieked before the fiery fate within. There was absolutely no pity. There was no remorse. And what was the unpardonable crime of those at Béziers? In the attackers' estimation, they were either heretics called Cathars, or they were fellow Catholics foolish enough to harbor them. It's said that the papal legate's troops were ordered not to particularly discriminate between Catholics and Cathars in the town, encouraged instead to, quote, kill them all. God will recognize his own, unquote. I'll go to the next picture. So there is a dedication there to the slaughter of these innocents. This is it right here. I'll go to the next one. Okay, so we'll put that down. That's for later on. Okay, so thank you, Margie. So what happens is that according to Pierre, de Vos de Sonnet, a Cistercian monk writing at the time, the leaders and often the instigator of this brutality, Simon de Montfort, typically followed his lengthy prayers by laying his sword upon the altar and crying out, this is the one who's connected to slaughtering all these people. All these people, right? Wow. What does he do? He prays. He says, this is his prayer. Prayer, in my perspective, is absolutely a murderer, killer, not a soldier. Cowardice. Here it is. Here's his prayer. Oh, good Lord, he says. Oh, gentle Jesus. What? He starts his prayer that way? It's unbelievable. I'll continue. You have chosen me to wage your wars in spite of my unworthiness. Since when do you, the God of the New Testament, want us to wage these wars? It is from your altar that I receive my arms today, so that in the moment of fighting your battles, I may receive my weapons from you, unquote. Because Simon was so completely believed he was right before God and that the Cathars were in error, he felt fully justified to murder them all in mass. So who were these Cathars, so seemingly deserving this deemed holy crusade, and becomes the trigger for the Inquisition? We're looking into the causes for the Inquisition, the need for something to be more that's created, an institution that's created to deal with the situation. Well, we got to look into the Cathars, look into the problem, and then we'll look into what is considered the Catholic solution to this. Got it? So we got to understand this. So who are the Cathars? The Cathars, the name originated from the word katharos, meaning pure, and was applied to many, by the way, Christian sects, including the Novatianists, mentioned by Epiphanius, and also mentioned by a certain Manichaean by the name of Augustine. The first group of so-called Cathars in Western Europe appears at Orleans in France in 1022. But there's not enough evidence to link them securely to other groups called the Paranas or Paternas. There exists, however, some evidence that suggests, well, actually to show or demonstrate that there is a link with the Bogomils. But let's go there. Let's go back. So what are the possible origins of the Cathars? Why this question has often been asked. The answer is long and drawn out and often means leading. With this in mind, I will briefly outline the gradual movement of a certain dualistic religious perspectives and how they evolved and gradually moved westward. The first dualistic religious system that will begin this spiritual odyssey is Zoroastrianism, more properly called Mazdaism because of its particular veneration of Ahura Mazda, the god of light. And of course, the founder is Zoroaster, whose origins are shrouded in mystery. The basic tenets of Mazdaism is that there's a great cosmic battle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, between Ahura Mazda, this great fire deity of purity and goodness, righteousness, and Ahriman or Ahrimanyu, who is the spirit of darkness. And so this world is between these two powers going back and forth. Eventually, Zoroastrianism will become the official belief system of the Persian Empire. And we'll feed into other ideas. Of course, this is not talking Zoroastrianism, but it's fascinating because you have this idea that the soul, right, splits when you're born, and you have this oversoul, and you have yourself, and you live your life, and you're judged by what you do, good or bad. And then when you die, your oversoul joins with your regular soul and tattles on you, says if you've been naughty or nice, and if you've been. And so as your tattling takes place, you cross what's called the Chinvat Bridge. And as you cross the Chinvat Bridge, if you have been good, and then the bridge is strong and it's wide, and you cross right over and you go to the House of Song, which is like paradise. But if you've been bad, the bridge twists and turns and throws you into the House of Pain, where there's with fire and brimstone, and the food is not very good, according to the Avestas. I don't know, guy's a chef, but it's like, well, you're burning up and everything else, and like, wow, the food just not enough salt. Anyway, so then what happens is that after a period of time, there arises up, born of a virgin, Sarosant, and Sarosant does miracles and all these kind of wonderful things, and there's a general resurrection of the dead. Yes, this is Zoroastrianism, Gnosticism. And so the righteous move from the House of Song and join the angelic Yazatas, join the angel-like beings, and of course the evil ones, they are released and they join the demons, and there's this great battle. There's a great apocalypse between the two going on there. The moon turns to blood. It's really terrible. And in the end, the good guys win, and everybody's brought before the great judgment throne of Ahura Mazda. And there's a lake of fire behind them, and everybody's pushed into the lake of fire. But if you've been good, if you're righteous, you won't burn. So yay. And if you're bad, you burn. There's other versions of it, but this is kind of, you can see there's a lot of ideas that come from Zoroastrianism. You have, of course, the devil concept, the messianic concept that goes in during the Babylonian captivity of Judaism. You got, apocalyptic Judaism, Anyway, so this belief system goes into a belief system called Manichaeism. Manichaeism, and of course, it's founded by Mani in around the 200s. He dies between 274 to 277 for heresy. So Mazdaism is now similar to the Zoroastrian in many ways. And so while Mazdaism or Zoroastrianism stressed the battling dualism between light and darkness, what will happen is Manichaeism, I'll say this, ultimately, nature will win over. They'll win the day. It's good. Ultimately, in Zoroastrianism, it's ultimately this battle will be worth it. But with Manichaeism, ultimately, this world is evil. Ultimately, it's evil, and it just needs to be destroyed. So it's a little different emphasis. So Mazdaism has some of the same idea of the dualism. You got the Father Light that commands the good through his divine emanations, and he sends the Mother of Life, the messenger. And in some systems, he sends Jesus, the luminous, who suffered, and whose disciple, Mani, offers the words of salvation. Meanwhile, the father of darkness fought against the light, where his demons were always attacking and tempting the good and pure. For Manichaeans, time was divided into 3 periods. First, an age when the spirit of light was not yet mixed with the matter of evil. Second, the present age, when the spirit and matter are mixed, causing tensions and constant conflict. And third, the future, when the good realm and the dark realm will be separated once again, and the good going to the realm of the north, the evil going to the realm of the south. Who is a big proponent of this? Yes, his name is Augustine. Augustine was a follower of Manichaeism before he converted over to Christianity, which is very much Latin West Catholic Christianity. And even though he denies this duality, that coming from Manichaeism, which in turn came from Zoroastrianism, because one was an offshoot from the other, what happens is that he does unfortunately put that dualism into theology. City of God, city of man, and also unfortunately empowers the darker side. There's a lot of focus more on evil, where early Christians didn't focus so much on the devil. They focus more on God and light. Now you're going to have this division. Okay. By the way, one other thing about that pertains to this talk, what happens also Manichaeism, the adherents of Manichaeism were separated into 2 grades: those who were the elect and those who were the hearers. And Augustine obviously was just a hearer. Okay, so then from this group, arise the Paulicians, who appeared in Asia Minor. So let's go ahead and start looking at the screen there. We'll take a look at some pictures here, pretty pictures. And so we'll see kind of things here. So yeah, so this right here is an image connected to, of course, Zoroastrianism. So you got Ahura Mazda. Go to the next image. Great. So the next image is a little bit of Manichaeism. So we have this emblem of Manichaeism. I think that's kind of cool. And then go to the next one. And these are really small. These are the Paulicians. They're connected now. They're kind of grow from the Manichaeism. They appeared in Asia Minor in Byzantine sources, and which testify that the Paulicians were dualistic and direct descendants of the Manichaeans. Some of the most prominent Byzantine scholars advocated this direct connection were Runciman and Lemaitre. They also believe that the incarnation of Christ is merely illusionary, a perspective often called Docetism, asserting that Jesus only appeared to be material, but was in reality spirit. This belief would be later shared by both the later Bogomils and the Cathars. But unlike the more peaceful Manichaeism, the Paulicians were a little bit more militaristic. Go to the next picture. So yeah, a little bit more militaristic. You get the point there, right? And so they formed their own independent state, surviving from 843 to 879, and openly raided the Byzantine Empire, often attacking the coastal cities of Asia Minor, including Ephesus in 869. Eventually, many of the Paulicians reached the Balkans and influenced another group emerging of duelists called the Bogomils. Go to the next picture. So we have remnants of the Bogomils in the Balkan regions. We're going to see a few of these pictures. The Bogomils believed that there existed two realms, an evil material one run by the devil and the spiritual one run by God. While they did accept much Orthodox theology, they practiced a very strict asceticism, with those considered of the elect even practicing complete sexual abstinence, as well as refraining from both wine and meat, much like we saw with the Manichaeans. The Bogomils were already stirring up waves in Constantinople by the 11th century. Persecution soon followed, helping to spread the movement in the direction of Western Europe. A group of Bogomils fought to hold their position in the Balkans and survived in Bosnia and Serbia and Dalmatia for quite some time. So take a look at the next pictures. So this is some of the remnants they have. Look, that's kind of really neat. And you can see this is, of course, the dualistic cross that will be later on adopted by the Cathars. Go to the next image. This is really small, but it's a really good image. I mean, it's a good picture there. Go to the next one. So, yes. So this is a characteristic. This is the cross of the Bogomils that will now become part of the cross of the Cathars. That we see that there before. Eventually, they move on to the Italian peninsula around the early 12th century because of the Ottoman Turks. By this time, these duelists had become known as Pateranes rather than Bogomils. According to primary sources from the time, dualistic missionaries arrived from the Balkans to teach a more absolute form of dualism in the south of France around the latter half of the 12th century. Another group of Bogomils went northward to Germany, eventually filtered down into France, coming from the other way, perhaps merging with their fellow duelists in the south of France, where they all became known as the Cathars or Albigensians. Go to the next image. Okay, that's good. Go to the next one. It's kind of small. I wish it were bigger. Oh yeah, there's another. That's a wonderful image for the Balkans. Kind of cool looking tombstones there, right? And see all the images there. Go to the next one. Love the iconography. All right. So, affirming a dualistic theology, the Cathars believed two equally powerful gods ruled the world. They believed the spiritual good God, who viewed as the God of love, and the deity dwelling within, and they believe in the deity dwelling within the material realm, who is fundamentally evil in essence, and that was called the Rex Mundi, or the king of the world. Yet they did not advocate a pure dualism, in that the Cathars envisioned a final winner in this contest, with the God of spirit eventually triumphing over the material devil in the end. Since the material realm and matter itself was evil, the Cathars either flat out denied Jesus could in any way participate with the material world and still be called the Son of God, and hence he was pure spirit, and so advocating what's called docetism, or they held he was no different from any other man who has ever lived. And so, in short, Jesus either died as a flesh and blood human on the cross, or he was a spirit in possession of a phantom body that could never suffer the indignity of crucifixion. As for the Old and New Testaments, which they did indeed use, they were seen as allegories meant to teach a moral doctrine of purity. Go to the next image. That's a great image. Because of their disdain for the material world, the Cathars were quite offended by the growing opulence enjoyed by the church, viewing their local Catholic clergy as complacent tools of the Dark One, of the Dark Lord. But they went further than just rejecting material wealth, for they also perceived that the physical body was indeed, quote, a filthy envelope of the flesh, unquote, purifying it by practicing a rigid asceticism and abstaining from anything related to matter or the creation of it, hence, of course, sex. And while sex was not outright condemned, it was discouraged, especially for those who sought to attain the highest perfection. Let's go to the next one. There's another great image of the cross. Let's go to the next one. That's good. Yes, beyond sexual abstinence, the Cathars rejected all forms of milk products, eggs, and every type of meat, except for fish in some cases. With this said, not all the Cathars could follow these strict rules, so two classes came out. Those who have been perfected, receiving the baptism of the Holy Spirit by the imposition of hands, the final seal that committed them to follow their complete abstinence before the God of Spirit, known as the Consolatium, and the common believers who promised to receive the baptism of the Spirit before they died. While they rejected the sacraments of the Catholic Church, as well as the doctrine of hell and purgatory, by the 1140s, the Cathars had organized into their own distinct church with a unique liturgy, hierarchy, and doctrines. Go to the next one. There he goes. There's the persecution there. Go to the next one. That's a good one too. Go to the next one. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Go to the next one. So, okay. So what happens now is one of the principal chroniclers from the early 13th century was a Cistercian Pierre de Val de Cernay, who recorded the massacre of Béziers and writing, amongst other things, a work called The Description of the Cathars and Waldensians. He reports of the Cathars' simple dress, accuses them of usury, and testifies to their very strict doctrine regarding Mary Magdalene. To begin with, Pierre Cernay notes the attack on Béziers occurred according to plan on July 22nd, which was the feast day of Mary Magdalene, adding how it was a supreme justice of providence, that's his words, in regard to the fact that the Cathars believed, quote, Mary Magdalene was a concubine of Jesus Christ, unquote. Incensed by this belief, he continues that, quote, it was therefore with just cause that those disgusting dogs were taken out and massacred during the feast of the one that they had insulted. All right, go to the next one. In his description of the Cathars and Waldensians, Cernay also asserts that the heretics affirmed the marriage of Jesus to Mary Magdalene. In other accounts, including a text called The Exposure of the Albigensian Heresies, often connected with Ergard Béziers, the claim is made once again that the, quote, Cathars taught in their secret meetings that Mary Magdalene was the wife of Jesus Christ, unquote. So you can see people are getting pretty angry within the Catholic Church and the clergy. Here they are. So they are in many cases claiming that Jesus is either fully human or he is fully a spirit, which of course is fine. But I'm saying this is upsetting for many Catholics of that day. They're not following the Eucharist. They are not following any of canon law. They have formed their own church. They teach this very strong sense of dualism. They are judging Catholics because of their hoarding of wealth. They practice a very strong sense of asceticism, and they view Mary Magdalene in many cases as the wife of Jesus. And so basically, even though I believe personally everybody has a right to believe whatever they want to believe, for Europe at this time, this was considered such a drastic departure that many within the Catholic Church panicked, especially since this belief system really spread. And I got to tell you a little secret when you look at primary sources. These Cathars, according to people who knew them, they were really kind. They were really nice. They're really hospitable. They were very loving. They took people in. They cared for people. And so very caring community. And as a result of that, people wanted to join. Hey, they're taking better care of us. They seem to care about our families more than the church does. So I think we're going to go to them. So this movement, spread a lot just by kindness and hospitality and empathy, even though they have a very high degree, almost a puritanical sense of asceticism. They still were known to be very kindly. So by 1243, the majority of the Cathar fortresses had fallen. And so let's take a look at these fortresses. There are so many. And it's so amazing how they're at the very top of the hill. Yes, I have actually been to some of these fortresses myself. I even published an article on that. Go to the next picture. Look at these. It's amazing. But obviously they're trying to protect themselves. Go to the next one. Look at this. That's pretty grand. I love it. Go to the next one. These are sprinkled all over the south of France. Wow. Yeah. Go to the next one. I've been to that one. Yeah. There's another complex. Go to the next one. Oh, this is great. This is an image of Mary Magdalene. Look at, definitely shown with a sense of authority. Yeah. Go to the next one. All right. So what's going to happen now? While the majority of the Cathar fortresses had fallen, yet one still remained at Montségur, which is perched 3,000 feet high upon a very fordable mount near the Pyrenees Mountains. Look at that. Look, that's way up there. Unfortunately, their good fortune did not last long, and soon 10,000 French troops surrounded the fortification. In March of 1244, the castle finally surrendered. The Cathars burned in a massive bonfire. Go to the next picture. So they are able to get up this cliff. Go to the next picture. It's good. Yeah. So as various accounts testify, just before the fortress capitulated to the Catholic forces, several Cathars reportedly slipped through Crusader front lines with a supposed treasure with them. Many believe, because the Cathars were so fervently anti-material in their doctrines, that this treasure must by necessity transcend mere material objects such as silver or gold, perhaps even having some kind of esoteric significance. Naturally, Grail legends began to be associated with Montségur. Indeed, there are some linguistic similarities in the Grail romance written by Wolfram von Eisenbach as Perceval, where this is written between 12 to 1210, where he calls his Grail castle Montsauvant, similar to Montségur, with both translated as meaning safe or secure mountain. Furthermore, the name of the historical Montségur Raymond Pere does have a certain similarity to the hero of Aschenbach's Worth, who's known as the Knight Percival. So you see similarities there. In another Grail epic by Albrecht von Schwackenberg, the first king of the Holy Grail also has a similar name to Percel, which is Perilla. The fact that the Cathars are so closely identified to this area near Rennes-le-Château, with its mysterious associations mentioned in Holy Blood, Holy Grail, only adds to the intrigue. You can take this down. Thank you so much, Margie. So you get the idea. Well, the Cathars are not, I would say not long gone, but they're diminished. Their mysterious remains will continue to perk the curiosity of so many enthusiastically seeking clues to some of Western Christianity's most intriguing legends for years to come. Of course, this evidence usually draws upon the well of either hostile Catholic sources or from meager evidence left by the Cathars themselves. As a result, the finds will always appear as sensational as a respective author needs then to become as well, right? But, so, now we got the problem. What's the solution? I don't think it's a problem, but the Catholics see this. You can still understand it's pretty extensive. This is a belief system that's very different from the Catholicism of that time. So by 1229, Pope Gregory the Ninth, okay, we'll go back to, look at a picture of Gregory. Pope Gregory the Ninth, he was in charge from 1227 to 1241. There he is, very small picture. Decided to officially establish that's actually Dominic there, but okay, well, we'll get to him in a few seconds, so we'll stay there. Officially established a permanent inquisition under the Domitians, who were based both in Rome and at Carcassonne. Now, the Domitians were founded by Dominic Felix de Guzman, who lived from 1170 to 1221. It's such a small picture, which we'll go ahead and put it down, but thank you so much. He was a Spanish priest early on. And Dominic cared for the poor and suffering. So when a famine hit Spain in 1191, he was known to have sold his clothes to feed those who were hungry. But yet in 1203 or 1204, Alfonso VIII, King of Castile, sent the Bishop of Osma to Denmark. He sent this bishop to Denmark in order to secure a bride for the crown prince, Ferdinand. And of course, the bishop chose Dominic to accompany him. So they traveled directly through Provence, and here, Dominic first encountered the Cathars directly. What happened? Well, he was angry. He was upset because they didn't have correct doctrine. And so this fueled his desire to preach to the Catholics who are remaining correct theology. And he also wanted to try to convert the Cathars back to the Catholic faith. Yet while he let his views be known about the Cathars, Dominic still died in 1221, so was in no way connected to the Inquisition. But his followers certainly were when Pope Gregory the Ninth created the Permanent Inquisition. So let's go to the next picture. I'm hoping Pope Gregory will pop up this time. Be seen, Gregory. Let's see if he's there. Hey, we got Gregory. Yes, so Gregory, he created the Permanent Inquisition. So this is the guy that creates the Permanent Inquisition. Now, under their leadership, under the leadership of the Dominicans. So the Dominicans are the ones. This is the order that's in charge of the Inquisition, and they will be that all the way through to the 1500s. So when you hear about the Inquisition, it is the Dominicans. Now, obviously, there's other Catholic orders. You know, you got the Franciscans who are pretty loving and kind and so forth. We'll hear a little bit about them a little bit later. You have the Cistercians, those who are wearing the whites, very intellectual. You have, but the the Dominicans, they are a preaching order. They preach, and they're all about correcting correct doctrine, and they're also about fighting heresy. So, so here we go. So this is Pope Gregory's fault. He's the one who did it. Their selection to become in charge of the Inquisition was natural since they were already involved in attempting to convert the Cathars in southern France. And since they were already there and involved with them, the Pope figured, hey, they could be part of their trials too. But because they were involved in the torture of those who were implicated in heresy, the Dominicans were often disliked. Let's go to the next picture. The Dominicans were often disliked, even by loyal Catholics. Loyal Catholics sometimes called them Domine Canes. Domine Canis, what does that mean? In Latin, that means God's dogs. That's right, God's dogs. Wow. Yeah, so not that popular. Okay, so thank you, Margie, so much. The papal bull, known as the Ad Extirpanda, was issued following the murder on April 6, 1252, of the papal inquisitor of Lombardy. His name is Saint Peter of Verona. Accordingly, those who wished to protect the Cathars killed this papal inquisitor. This bull, then issued by the Pope, declared that the heretics, including the Cathars, were, quote, murderers of souls as well as robbers of God's sacraments and of the Christian faith, unquote. Because of their fallen condition, they were to, quote, to be coerced, as are thieves and bandits, into confessing their errors and accusing others, although one must stop short of danger to life or limb, which is interesting. As for torture, certain limits were defined. In general, torture could be used if, number one, it did not cause loss of life or limb, situa membri diminutitum et mortis peculium. It was also had to be used only once, and the inquisitor deemed the evidence against the accused to be virtually certain. So these are the reasons. So the limits, again, I'll say this again, is that there's no loss of life or limb, right? It was to be used only once, and the inquisitor had to already beforehand deem the evidence against the accused to be virtually certain. Obviously, these restrictions are not going to be exactly followed. And so we're now going to go into exactly how the Inquisition worked. Here we go. In general, here we go. The procedure of the Inquisition went as follows. Messengers would arrive in town, and they would announce that the inquisitors were soon to arrive and to be ready to greet them. For if they believed in the church and the theology taught by the church, they had nothing to fear. And so you'd see in the distance them arriving. Sometimes they would arrive in procession. There are even records of them, sometimes the music, they're singing as they're arriving, or chanting, right? Upon arrival, they asked if anybody wished, possibly with a smile, to volunteer, to talk with them, if they had any questions regarding their beliefs, if they understood their beliefs properly. It seemed like a nice appeal, doesn't it? Say, hey, guys, do you believe? Do you have any problems? We're here to help out. We're here to clear up the ambiguities. You have nothing to be afraid of from us. We're just here to help. That's it. After that, they would find other volunteers that were suspect in some of their beliefs, and in some cases, informed upon to the inquisitors by name through somebody else in the community. and say, I don't like this guy. I'm going to report him to the Inquisitor. And they find out, oh, really? If those who spoke to the Inquisitors were found to be in error in any way, but that this error was minor, the Inquisitors corrected them, asked them to swear their loyalty to the Catholic Church, and told to perform a small penance. Not too bad. Of course, the Cathars were forbidden to swear oaths. You guys catch that, right? Again, they're told to swear their loyalty to the Catholic Church and told to perform a small penance. So immediately, if the person refused to swear the oath to the Catholic Church, they knew that was a Cathar, and they got him. And so at this point, the Inquisitor would know, and they would be immediately arrested. The Inquisitors also encouraged these volunteers to explain why they had believed their repentant error in the first place. Was it on their own? Did they come up with this messed up theology on their own? Or did somebody else tell them to believe this way? And if the latter, who were they? And did they happen to be nearby? Now, the person showed any kind of hesitation, not wishing to betray a family or friend, the Inquisitor would then suddenly become a little more earnest, telling them that their loyalty was always to the Catholic Church, and it's first and foremost above family and friends. You put God first. Put God first in your life. Put your wife and kids and family and everybody else, put them all second, right? If they refused again, then the threats begin. They start to threaten, with the Inquisitor asserting that doesn't look like you're truly sorry for your error, and that by protecting others who are part of this error, you are defending the devil. Do you really want to defend the devil? And the consequences, of course, for doing so would be quite severe, as you can imagine. If they continued to resist, they were then arrested and tortured until they gave away the names. Of course, you had those who implicated everyone in the community, and they implicated them of all sorts of errors and heresies. Some are very much just busy ratting everybody out. And if this happened, the Inquisitor, every single one of these individuals were investigated, even if they just kind of spelled out names. So if it turned out that the person who implicated everyone appeared to be incorrect in that person's assumption, they were not charged with anything for the false accusation. What? No, they're not charged anything. They're just viewed to be simply zealous for the purity of the Catholic faith. And good job. This was forgivable. This was praiseworthy. For such vigilant disposition could make for a heresy-free community. So keep up the good work. Go about it. Ooh. If those who were suspected of error or outright heresy did not volunteer themselves upon the Inquisitor's arrival into their community, knowing full well that they were present, and of course, and those of the Inquisition knew about them through others of the community, these individuals were then sought out and forcibly taken in, questioned, and if still resistant, they were arrested and imprisoned. Often they were not even told what they were charged for, as they were questioned until the sought after charge would come to the surface. So they did this whole thing of, okay, so you're guilty. What am I guilty for? What do you think you're guilty for? Well, I didn't do anything. Yeah, you did. Everybody's talking about it. Was it for this? And the person messes up and they mention something else wrong. Oh, no, it wasn't that. But, so what about that? Wait, no, wait, no. Was it for this? No, it wasn't for that either, but we're keeping a list here. Go back to that one too. All this kind of intimidation occurred. They often employ these trick questions, intentionally trying to confuse those being questioned. Of course, the assumption was always that one was guilty until proven innocent, because no longer do we have the Roman system of innocent until proven guilty. No, no, no. It's guilty until proven innocent, because after all, original sin, right? It's the idea that, you know, the first thing we'll go to is to the realm of error. So we must assume that the person is sinful first and then work the other way out. Now, the inquisitors had a two-strike rule. For a person was not supposed to put death for the first offense. They could be tortured at length, even imprisoned for a while, but the first offense, they can't be killed. Yet if they committed a second offense, they were to be executed. Now, of course, the inquisitor had to keep track of who had committed the first offense. This is terrible how they do this. And so they came up with various strategies beyond simply writing down their names and where they live. In the case of the Cathars, they were required to, quote, carry from now on and forever, I'm quoting, 2 yellow crosses on all their clothes, except their shirts, and one arm shall be 2 palms long, while the other transversal arm shall be 1.5 palms long, and each shall be 3 digits wide, with one to be worn in front of the chest and the other to be worn between the shoulders. Wait, what? Yeah, they had to wear a badge of distinction. They have to wear a yellow cross or badges. Now, what happens? This sounds very familiar. This will go on with the Inquisition, and later on in Spain, they will apply this strategy to the Jewish community. And of course, later on, that idea will be, will be revived under the Nazi regime. This is where these ideas come from. The Inquisition comes up with this idea. Isn't this horrendous? Wow. Now, after a while, the yellow cross or badge became too worn or torn or even lost. So what are you supposed to do, right? They were required to go to the Catholic authorities to get a new one. Meanwhile, good Catholics were encouraged to shun such offenders, now easily done with these blatant badges for them all to see. The crosses were called in the Occidental dialect Las Desbandoras, which means translated reels or winding machines. Why do they call them winding machines? Because it's the belief that with this mark, there are always potential heretics and may be easily reeled in by the Catholic authorities at that time. Wow, that's really bad. Yeah, really bad. So worse still for those found guilty the first time around, for they were to lose half of their property to the church as a fine for their heresy. Eventually, you can see where this is going. Many wealthy people with substantial properties became targets for the Inquisition, feeding the coffers of the church if found guilty. A good way of creating more revenue for the church is just to find just to accuse a bunch of wealthy people through the Inquisition of heresy. And this happened a lot, and they're taken care of. As the Inquisition became more corrupt, the Dominicans expanded the trials against heresy to even the deceased who died before they were brought to trial. So they actually would dig up these heretics, tried their bones, and when found guilty, they seized half of their lands from their heirs. So it's like, oh no, you inherited something from your dad. Your dad's found guilty of heresy. Well, what's going to happen is they dig up dad. They excommunicate dad who passed away, and you lose half your property. It really corrupt. This is the worst. Those convicted of heresy for the second time by the church were then to be handed over to the state for execution. I'm going to quote from, so when those a judge guilty of heresy have been given up to the civil power, the bishop or his representative, or the Inquisition, the podesta or chief magistrate of the city shall take them at once, I'm quoting, and shall within 5 days at most execute the laws made against them, unquote. I have lots of primary sources here. The state also received an appropriate amount also of the heretic's property. Wait, the state also receives something? So you mean the church gets something, but the state also gets something, or the province? So this is a win-win for these individuals. It sure is. Of course, concerns are raised over those who oversaw the tortures of heretics. And so in 1256, the Pope mandated that all the inquisitors were to receive immediate absolution if they use instruments of torture. You mean they got immediately forgiven for torturing people? Uh-huh. Who did that? The Pope in 1256. Now, the Dominicans developed very cruel methods of opposing this Inquisition, with the consuls of Carcassonne writing the following to the Inquisitor Jean Galland. So this is the consul of Carcassonne. So let's go to the next image. I do have some interesting images here. So we'll go there. All right, there's the Inquisitor court. That's a good image. Very good. Yeah, go to the next one. Dominicans, you can see them there. Okay, I'm not sure how long it take this image, but this is the wheel. Let's go to the next one. I'm not sure if I want to be staring at it very long. This is the rack. Okay, let's go to the next one. I guess there's no good images of these. Okay, let's put this one down. Thank you. It gets you the idea. I don't want to be looking at these images. They're just too upsetting for me. The Dominicans, again, so this is a primary source. Okay, so once again, this is the consul of Carcassonne, who's writing the following to the Inquisitor by the name of Jean Galland. He says as follows to this Inquisitor. He says, contrary to the practice and custom of your predecessors, you have created a prison called the Wall, which would be better called Hell. In it, you have constructed small cells to inflict pain and to mistreat people using various types of torture. Some cells are so dark and airless that those imprisoned there cannot even tell whether it is night or day. They permanently lack air and light. In other cells, the miserable prisoner remains in fetters of either wood or metal and are unable to move. They excrete and urinate where they are and cannot lie down except on their backs on the cold earth. In other places, in the prison, they lack air and light and also food, except he says, the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, which are provided only rarely. Some are placed on the chevalet, which is the rack. Many of them have lost the use of their limbs because of the severity of the torture and are rendered entirely powerless. Life for them is such an agony, and death is a relief. Under these constraints, they affirm as true what is false, preferring to die once than to thus be tortured multiple times. They accuse not only themselves, but also others who are innocent in order to escape their suffering in any way. Those who so confess reveal afterwards that what they have said to the brother inquisitors, who are the Dominicans, is not true, but false, and that they had confessed out of fear of the peril of the moment. To some of those witnesses that you cite, you promise immunity so that they will more freely denounce others without fear, unquote. This is bad. The chevalet, of course, is the rack where the arms and legs are strapped to a table and gradually pulled further and further apart if the person is not responding properly. Eventually, there is a snap in the cartilage as the arms and legs are pulled out of their sockets. Another device used was called the head crusher, with the person's chin placed on the lower bar that is connected via a screw to a metal cap placed on top of the head, which is then slowly turned until the teeth break and the skull fractures. With the Iron Maiden, a person is positioned in an upright coffin-shaped box, which has a lid of sharp spikes that are slowly closed upon the person. And of course, upon complete closure, the person would eventually die. With the strappado, the person's arms were tied above their head and hang suspended. At various intervals, they were suddenly dropped, dislocating the arms of the person in the process. With the wheel, which you saw, this device was rolled over the person's body, and because it was spiked, it would impale them as they did so. The heretic's fork was basically a metal collar with two forks moving laterally from it, with one pointing towards the chest and the other under the neck, forcing the person to keep his head up or otherwise piercing himself. So you got to keep it up or otherwise piercing himself. With the water torture, about 8 quarts of water are poured down the victim's mouth as their nose is plugged, giving them the sensation of drowning. This is what they're doing in the name of the church. This is what they're doing. And it's very upsetting. And so once now armed, this institution that was created to address the Cathars were getting, obviously they get wiped out, and the remnant gets wiped out through the Inquisition. There's also another target that they have. That's right. The Waldensians. The Waldensians? Yeah. Have you heard of them before? A lot of people haven't, although I've had one of my students one time being a surviving Waldensian. Basically, the Waldensians are Protestants before we know Protestants exist, and they're so forgotten because they wiped out so many of them. Peter Waldo is the founder of the Waldensians. He lived from 1140 to 1218. He was a wealthy merchant from Lyon, yes, again, France. And he founded this layman movement known as the Waldensians, which focused on preaching and voluntary poverty, as well as emphasizing Christianity upon the Bible, and a Bible that was not in Latin, but a Bible that was in a local vernacular language so all could read and understand it. Remember, he's 1140 to 1218. We don't get the Protestant Reformation till the 1500s. So he's doing this in 1200s, and we have to wait to the 1300s, the 1400s, and the 1500s for this to happen. And yet, we can see right away how the Protestant movement is really inspired by this individual. Waldo made his drastic change in life, embracing a life of voluntary poverty for a few reasons. One of the reasons, of course, first of all, Waldo was influenced by the life of Saint Alexis of Rome. According to the story, Alexis fled from Rome before his arranged marriage, leaving his father, who was a wealthy Christian Roman from the senatorial class. And he ended up in the city of Edessa in Syria. Alexis put on the outfit of a beggar and asked for alms. When his father's servants came to look for him, Alexis, incognito, begged for alms from them. Returning to Rome, he was totally changed from his parents to the point where he was not recognized at all. And so he was just seen as a simple beggar devoted to God. And so his parents, not knowing his identity, took him in. And he lived in a small niche below the chairs. Here he spent his time teaching catechism to children and praying. After 17 years living there, Alexis died. It was at this point that his family found papers on him, revealing him to be actually their lost son. And so he was inspired by this individual. And of course, obviously, this story is brought over from the east to the west. When the Greek metropolitan Sergius of Damascus was exiled and arrived in Rome, and Pope Benedict VII gave him the virtually abandoned church of St. Boniface in Aventine Hill in 972. And so Waldo's part of this group. So the idea is volunteered poverty. Poverty was number one. Second, Waldo could not agree with the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation. He didn't believe that the bread and wine became the literal body and blood of Christ. He said that, and to say that, by the way, if you actually said that it was not true, transubstantiation, it was considered a capital offense. It was considered death. Third, Waldo had difficulty accepting the idea of purgatory, saying that it was an invention of the Antichrist. He said when one died, he believed they went right to heaven, and those who didn't believe, what the hell, I guess. Fourth, he rejected the idea of the veneration of relics of saints, and in fact, the entire cult of the saints in general. He believed that this was actually a morbid cult. Fifth, mystical energies and curatives were simply nonsense. Holy water is just rainwater. Six, he believed that priests should not be that important. In fact, he said that there should be a universal priesthood, adding that that you can pray to God in a barn as well as a church. And seventh, the death of his close friend made him realize that material things are no good, but also that we need to give all to those who are hungry, who are needy, who are the poor. So this is the movement which parallels Martin Luther. So, of course, one more, number 8, the ability for the followers to understand the Bible, if literate, to read it for themselves. And so he advocated the translation of the Bible from Latin into his own language, which is Arpitan, which is the language of Franco-Provence. And this was undertaken between 1175 to 1185. Waldo also took issue with the corruption of the church. He said that they were the harlot of Revelation, and so they were. And of course, this movement, they're known as the poor of Lombardy. So in 1179, old Waldo, this is going to be received very well. Old Waldo went to Rome and approached the Pope Alexander and the Roman Curia to discuss the movement. Waldo told them that he believed in the universal priesthood of all believers. He told them, he wanted to be part of this voluntary poverty movement. What happens, of course, is almost immediately this movement is condemned, right? The Third Lateran Council viewed Waldo and his ideas as worthy of condemnation, but he was not excommunicated as of yet. But almost immediately, Waldo's followers were driven out of Lyon, and of course, the Inquisition is now, the wheels are starting to move, and they moved to the south of Provence and Piedmont, living in the valleys here and there, trying to continue their ideals. But then Pope Lucius III, who reigned from 1181 to 85, officially excommunicated Waldo. Still, Waldo continued, and since his views are understood as heretical, anyone mentioning that they believed in the universal priesthood of all believers, or that the Bible should be in the local language, were now the potential targets of the Inquisition, and they would ask those specific questions. Do you believe in the universal priesthood of believers? If they did, you're a Waldensian. You're going. It's over for you. You must believe everything else. And so what happens is in Strasbourg, 80 Waldensians were burned at the stake as a result in 1211, charged with espousing heretical ideas. In the Fourth Lateran Council, 1215, the entire movement of the Waldensians was declared as heretical. At this point, persecutions began, and soon the wheels of the Inquisition got even worse, because now it is powered by the Dominicans. In 1 year alone, 12,000 Waldensians were arrested and tried in Italy, and 9,000 were put to death. Because the Waldensians openly admitted that they believed in the universal priesthood of believers, that transubstantiation was not valid, that the Bible should be the vernacular, and the cult of saints was a sham, the inquisitor's job was made easy, permitting very quick ordeals and immediate deaths. In one day, for example, 150 were burned alive at Grenoble in 1393. It's a slaughter. The Pope Innocent now the Eighth, from 1484 to 1492, issued the papal bull of excommunication in 1487, and with Alberto di Capellini, the Archduke of Cremona, organizing a crusade against them. Throughout Piedmont, Charles I, Duke of Savoy, the ruler of these territories, had enough, and he stopped this crusade and told the Waldensians he would let them live in peace. Not that many were left, so many fleeing to the nearby Provence. But during the Protestant Reformation, the Swiss and French reformers viewed the Waldensians as being an early precursor of their movement. In fact, in October 12, 1532, the Waldensians joined the Reformed Church. But this did not help the Waldensians, a Catholic territory for the French king. Francis I viewed the Waldensians as spreading sedition and ordered their massacre in Provence in 1545, sending an army of 2,000 to go from village to village, killing every Waldensian they could find. How do they know? Hundreds and hundreds died. How do they know? The Inquisition. The Inquisition figured it out. They had them all listed, ready for the slaughter. And then in January 1655, the Duke of Savoy decided to force the Waldensians of Piedmont to convert, ordering them all to attend Catholic Mass within 20 days, or they had to sell their property and move to the upper valleys. The majority simply moved. Frustrated by this strategy that didn't work, the Duke decided to kill them all on April 24th, 1655, which became known as the Easter Piedmont Massacre. Peter Lage records. Now I'm reading another source. Peter Lage records. Little children were, I can't read all this because it's too upsetting. Little children were torn from the arms of their mothers, clasped by their tiny feet, and their heads dashed against the rocks, or were held between two soldiers and their quivering limbs torn up by the main force. Their mangled bodies. That's stuff. It's dismemberment, tied in trees. It's too bad. It gets, what I read was not the worst of it. So, target number 2. Target number 3, the spiritual Franciscans. So before we go there, let's take a look at some images because we probably need to. Waldensians, oh God. So let's take a look at the. so there's Peter Waldo right there. Yeah, this is the image. The Waldensians being persecuted. You can see what's going on here. The next image. That's pretty far, but you get the idea. Next image. All right. Yeah, this is good. The spiritual Franciscans, also known as the Fratelli or the Little Brothers. Unlike other Franciscans, by the way, they're still around, believed to be true to their movement, that most of them observed exactly how St. Francis himself had demonstrated. They are the purest. They want to follow exactly how St. Francis of Assisi practices belief. They practiced a very strict sense of poverty. They preached, but they also believed in complete humility. They also had this concept of absolute empathy and hospitality and kindness and love, especially those in need. They emerged during the 1270s, causing much division. To deal with this new faction, some of the leaders of the order decided to actually throw them in jail. The first, of course, being Peter, seen here, Jean Olivier, in 1283. Peter Jean Olivier taught that the arrival of St. Francis marked the advent of a new spiritual age. I'll go to the next picture, which would lead to the eventual second coming of Christ. But before this happened, the church would become corrupt, making ready for the arrival of the Antichrist, who would assume leadership of the church. This new evil church, as led by the Antichrist, will persecute true spiritual Christians. Olivier taught his followers to remain steadfast, for they only had to endure suffering for a short while, for soon after Christ would appear. Jean Olivier asserted that humans naturally had free will to decide between right and wrong within themselves. To demonstrate this, he paired up opposites which we were fully capable of. So there's on one side, there's zeal, on the other side, there's mercy. On one side, there's friendship, and the other side is hostility. There's shame and glory, gratitude, ingratitude, subjugation, domination. hope and distrust, and carefreeness and heedlessness. If free will was not possible, neither would of these pairs, asserted Olivier. He declared that every human being senses with complete certainty within himself that they have this free will, and that in essence, its free will is the cause of its motion when it is moved, and the cause of its rest when it's rested. And why follow the simple life of St. Francis, he says? This is pursued, I love this, solely and purely because of the love of justice, and never because of force or manipulation. For then such an aim is not valid, but counterfeit. Yet through their example, he continued, he wished people to do what is righteous before God, for he said, quote, we do not intend simply to move someone towards what is good, but rather to make it that he voluntarily move himself towards the good. He did not believe that you could be forced to do good. He believed you had a choice to do good, and that you should not be forced to do good. It should be you can imagine what the church, as well as those who are the Dominicans and the Inquisition, are thinking, no, because their whole thing is forcing people to be good through fear, through intimidation, through torture. And these spiritual Franciscans, unlike the other Franciscans who at that time compromised, these ones are speaking about a different ideal. Love? What's that about? Well, apparently that's, supposed to be important. Olivier also did not like Aristotle, saying without reason he is believed as the god of this age. He didn't like Aristotelian logic. So then the spiritual Franciscans were declared as heretics by Boniface VIII in 1296, but were soon forgiven by the next decade, with Olivier released from prison as well as to die a free man in 1298. But his tomb soon became the center of veneration along with his writings. To stop his popular sainthood, the General Chapter of Lyon declared his writings as heretical in 1299, with all of them ordered and gathered up and burned. But the spiritual Franciscans continued to increase in number, and the leadership again began to throw them into prisons. Clement V attempted to intervene in the controversy, hoping for a compromise, but neither side would have it. The spiritualists further created havoc by claiming certain convicts as their own. In 317, Pope John the 22nd ordered the spiritual Franciscans to submit to the authority of the community, or they would face the Inquisition. Those who refused faced the Inquisition and imprisoned, and then they were burned at the stake in 318. Meanwhile, the same year, the tomb of Olivier was destroyed so as to end any focal point for this movement amongst both spiritualists and Benguines. Of course, his writings were again declared as heretical and were ordered destroyed by the General Chapter of Marseille. All right, so, okay, next image. So these are the spiritual Franciscans. There they are, unfortunately suffering. Okay, go to the next one. I think that's the end of those. Yeah, oh yeah. Another image there. That's good. That's a Francis. Thank you. Okay, so after the death, you do want to hear this part, okay, because now we're moving to the Templars. Yeah, next. After the death of Benedict the 11th in 1304, a dispute arose between the Italian French cardinals over who should be the next pope. That dragged on for years. Eventually, Pope Clement V, who reigned from 1305 to 1314, was elected. Right from the beginning, his elevation defied tradition. For while most of the popes were Italian, Clement was French. And unfortunately, he proved to be simply the puppet of the French monarch by the name of Philip IV, who reigned, so actually he lived, so basically 1285 to 1314. He wished to undo many of the harsh edicts against his authority as the French king, as issued by the previous pope, especially the parts known as Unum Sanctum, which was issued on November 18th, 1302, which asserted that spiritual authority was stronger than secular authority. Now with his hands free, Philip IV could work through Pope Clement to take care of his perceived competition. Philip believed that the Knights Templar had gained too much power. And so Clement proposed that this order of prestigious knights should merge with the Knights Hospitallers. The Templars were quite wealthy by this time, declared as rich as kings, while the Hospitallers had far more manors, numbering about 19,000. The Templars had 9,000. However, their manors were far larger, extensive. So the very same year that he became Pope, Clement sent messages to both Templar Master Jacques de Molay and Hospitaller Grand Master Alfouc de Velay about combining their orders, and they both thought this was a very bad idea. But Clement was determined, and in 1306 instructed that they were to meet him to continue this conversation. Because the head of the Hospitallers could not get to the meeting for a few months, de Molay, here we go, of the Templar, was forced to spend more time with Clement in early 1307. And while waiting for the other esteemed knight, Clement informed de Molay that a knight, formerly of his order, was making some charges against them. He said that they were worshiping demons and doing other kinds of atrocities. They called him the new Pontius Pilate. This is Philippe le Bel. They also call him the Scourge of France. He did have his motivations, of course, for he is playing the right part on this complicated political game, especially with Philip. And so what happens is Philip was greatly in debt to the Knights Templar. He owed them so much money. So, in fact, he was infamous for not being able to balance his own books. He just kept borrowing and borrowing. So what's a good way to get out of debt? Since the Knights Templar are the ones who are loaning all this to him, he's supposed to pay them back. Well, maybe the best way is to charge them with heresy, and then as a result, get rid of those people and be out of debt. You just kill those who owe you money. So, and also, the Templars, they own so much property. So if he was successful in accusing them, the King of France could also gain their lands, and so move these lands from church ownership to state ownership. It's a great deal. You just got to figure out how to do this. How do we do this? So a plan was created. It started on the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, Friday the 13th. De Molay and 60 other Templars were seized by Philip's troops and arrested in Paris. The warrant declaring that God is not pleased, we have enemies of the faith in the kingdom, because it was a heresy charge. Guess whose responsibility? Yeah, that's right. The Inquisition, here we go. The Inquisition, yes. And so now the Inquisition now has to try these Templars. Of course, the Inquisition managed to find heresy that they were so vigorously looking for. The denouncing or spitting on the cross was a common charge. And this occurred during the initiation into the order, it was said. One knight under torture declared, I actually have the sources right here, declared, I have it in French here. I have it. Okay. I, Ramon de la Fere, 21 years old, admit that I have spat 3 times on the cross, but only from my mouth and not from my heart, they told the inquisitors. Raymond de Caron, which is different, that's not La Fere, there's a lot of common names, was taken aside after his initiation by a brother servant, shown a small cross or crucifix, and told, you must denounce this one, to which Ramon replied, and so I denounce. Geoffrey of Charnay was taken aside by the brother who initiated, shown a crucifix with the effigy of Christ, and was told that he should not believe in the crucified, but should in fact denounce him. And so we have just a list of all these constantly. I have the lists here. Another claim against them was sodomy. But all the inquisitors established was that Raymond de Caron and Hugo de Pouron knew that 3 of their knights were arrested for this offense and imprisoned at the Castle Pilgrim for this charge. Raymond de Caron said that during his initiation, that if he found himself not able to control his lust, he was said to take care of it secretly, but there's no mention of sodomy. Hugo said he was one of those who told the knights during the initiation to refrain from also partnerships with women, but it doesn't necessarily mean sodomy, so there's an absence of evidence. One of the most serious charges was the accusation of idolatry. Just for let's take a look at some images here. So we've got the Knights Templar. Although just what images they were. Okay, this is the Clement. This is Pope Clement. Right there. Sorry, the earlier one. Go back. Go back. Philip the Fair. That's Philip the Fair, who's not fair at all. And now back the other direction. And this is, of course, thank you so much, Margie. And this is Clement. Let's go to the next image. We don't have any real good pictures of the head of the Templar Order, and I apologize ahead of time. But this is Jacques de Molay. At least gives you an idealized version. You see the Templar cross there. I'll go to the next image. This is a good image, contemporaneous of the Templars. Go to the next image. That's great. Love it. Yeah, so this is, of course, connected to some of the images that were found idolatry. Although just what image they worship was disagreed upon. In one version, they worshipped a mummified severed head. Some presume that this may have been a relic related to John the Baptist, who was beheaded at the request of Herod Antipas's daughter, Salome. This head was related to ceremonies connected to the Temple Mount, where they originally based. The head was supposedly referred to, according to what the inquisitors found out, referred to as a savior, and so automatically leaves out the belief that it was the head of Hugh de Paynes, who is the founder of the Templars. But John the Baptist was often viewed as a savior figure, so maybe there's a connection there. I don't know. We know a little about the relic of John the Baptist's head earlier on. According to the early Christian legend, Herod Antipas sent the head to Damascus, and then later on it was enclosed in the church during the reign of Theodosius, but eventually it was transported to Constantinople. During the sack of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade in 1204, Robert de Clary, who was one of the Crusaders, plundered the Bucolian Palace, and here they found the robe of Our Lady and the head of my Lord John the Baptist. That's a quote. From here, many churches then claimed to receive this head of John the Baptist, including the Cathedral of Amiens, France, and the Church of Saint Sylvester in Rome, Saint-Chapelle in Paris, and St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice. Of course, the conspiracy theories abound. One of the most interesting saying that the Templars actually discovered the mummified head of Jesus Christ, which posed certain theological issues concerning his believed bodily resurrection. The next part tells how the Pope supposedly told the Templars to keep this fact a secret so as not to destroy the credibility of their power base. Yet because this was a relic, the Templars believed to possess supernatural powers, supposedly, and develop rituals to harness those energies. These are all just rumors. Another possible source actually derives from the initiation ritual of the Muslim sect known as the Assassins, as led by the Old Man of the Mountain. In this initiation, the prospective assassin to be was brought before a head of a man that was made to appear decapitated, but in reality, the man's head was sticking through a hole in the floor with the rest of his body down below, the area around his collar tightly fitted with a basin filled with chicken blood. The initiate then asked questions of the head. I don't want to keep seeing this image, so let's go to the next one. But there is a head on there. You see there? Okay. And since the person was actually alive, they would receive answers. So basically, they're talking to this head that's set in the table, saying, "Hey, this is things." Now, The talking head will tell them about all the pleasures in paradise as filled with black-eyed virgins and all the other possibilities if they served the old man of the mountain. Once this part was completed, they would actually cut off the head of this man out of sight and place it on a pole, at which point it would serve to legitimize the belief that the man's head was actually dead at the time of the earlier conversation. Some have suspected that one of these heads got into the Templars' possession. The second version of the story had the Templars worshiping a figure known as Baphomet. The meaning of the word is often contested, but one view is that it relates to the Greek word baphe meteos, which translates as baptism of wisdom. Others say it derives from the Arabic word ubufuat, which means father of wisdom. Still more assert that the name Baphomet is merely a corrupt word for Muhammad, based upon how they pronounced it, Muhammad. Now, the first time the word appears, Baphomet, was in a letter by Anselm of Ribemont on July of 1098, who does state, as the next day dawned, they called loudly upon Baphomet, and we prayed silently in our hearts to God. Then we attacked and forced all of them outside the city walls. So the very first time it ever appears at all, it is used in the context of being Muhammad. Doesn't mean that's the answer, but it's the first time it is extant in records. To further a Muslim association, Ramon de Aguiaz, one of the chroniclers of the First Crusade, calls the mosques of the Muslims Baphometus, and I have the Latin right here. According to various admissions, the Templars gave salutations, Ya Allah. So remember, this is all information that the Inquisitors are finding. So I'm reporting what they're getting out of these Crusaders. So that's why we're talking about this. So they gave the salutation, Ya Allah and Yallah before this image, which would likely translate as Hail Allah or Hail God. Yet, this declaration was most likely maybe Yallah Sidna, which means, O God, our Lord. For this phrase is found amongst various Templar alchemical symbols, which we're seeing right here, by the way. Yet, for those of the Mandeans, John the Baptist, as their founder, was called Yallah. So it could also be Yallah Sidna, John, our Lord. In the Burgundy Temple of the Templars, the lid of one of the sacred relics has an inscription, Yallah Sidna, next to the head of a man. Possible further connections to this identification. At the center of this lid is a very odd figure, a bearded man with breasts and female genitals. Go back to the earlier one. So this is the image here. Thank you, Margie. Yeah, it is. Okay, so at the very center of this lid, very odd, is a bearded man, with breasts and female genitalia, holding up in one hand a pole, holding up the sun, the other holding up the moon. So often an image connected to Baphomet is double-headed in various Templar engravings. Let's go to the next. Go to the next image and the next one. The next one, and should be the double-headed image, I believe. There, it's not very well seen. Double-headed god Janus in many ways. Thank you so much. Good. Okay, so and the images. Thank you so much, Margie. So de Molay was tortured beyond reason. The head of the Knights Order, tortured beyond reason, 11 days straight, until he confessed to everything Philip le Bel had said. De Molay confessed that part of the initiation of the Templars, including, quote, denying Christ and trampling on the cross. The Inquisition got that out of him. Next, de Molay was forced to write a letter telling all the other Templars to admit to these crimes. Wow, it broke him. The Inquisition broke him. The Dominicans broke this man. With his admission of guilt, Philip next sent out a message that the kings of Christendom need to arrest the Templars for their hideous crimes against God. Edward I of England, his rival, doubted the legitimacy of such an assertion and said that his country believed in a fair and impartial jury. Meanwhile, James of Aragon absolutely refused to comply. No, this is just Philip. Philip had crossed the line, declaring heresy, following their inquisition before Clement. For once, Clement did not permit the French king to get away with a declaration that was not officially supported by him. He wrote to Philip, "You have perpetuated these attacks on persons and goods of people directly subject to the Roman Church. In this action of yours, everybody sees an insulting contempt for us and the Church of God." So Clement dispatched 2 cardinals from Rome to Paris to hear for himself. You know, forget the Inquisition, forget Philip's power. What really happened? So Clement sends these cardinals to Paris to hear himself the confessions of the knights. And as a result, of course, now not under torture, they revoked their confessions. One knight even said that he was in such pain that he would have confessed killing God himself to stop the pain. Philip's own people considered his actions illegal, with lawyers from Paris University telling the king, he was unjustified to even consider a trial against de Molay. And so what happens is more manipulation. What happens eventually is that of course somebody who is an official, who is in a high position, a bishop, had to decide the verdict. Of course, the idea would be the Bishop of Rome. So what Philip did is, before Clement could make, as a Bishop of Rome, as the Pope, make his declaration, what he did is he set the Archbishop Philip de Marigny of Sciennes, whose archdiocese included Paris, on the case. He said, no, this guy's doing the case. Of course, because this individual just happened to be the brother of the king's chief financial minister, the outcome was a foregone conclusion. Through the authority of the church, all 54 Templars he examined were guilty as a result of heresy and were to be burned at the stake. And because of that, now the Pope has to follow the precedent of these bishops. And so on November 22nd, I know, my birthday, 1307, the Pope Clement is now forced to order all Christian kings to arrest all Templars and take all their property and assets. And then, of course, obviously, in 1312, you're going to have the Templar order is officially dissolved by Clement. And yes, Philip gets away. And of course, what will happen is you have the burning of the stake of de Molay. There is, of course, this interesting story about the curse of de Molay. God knows who is wrong. God knows who is wrong and who has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death. And of course, soon after, it was reputedly de Molay. It's not. Soon after, though, there is death. In fact, what happens is that right after this, Clement died, the Pope, on April 20th, 1314, after a long illness. And Philip IV died on November 29th, 1314, the very same year, a few weeks after suffering a stroke while hunting. He was only 45 at the time. So there's the declaration. What happened is there was somebody that was watching at that time that said something to the effect, but really there was also another Templar from Naples in a later occasion that declared this version of the story. He says, "From this your heinous judgment to the living and true God who is in heaven," then of course something bad will happen. So there you have it. Years before, I'll just will say this. So the Inquisition got them. By the way, I want to say this. So when does the Inquisition, when do we finally get the records, all of them released, for the Knights Templar? Well, guess what? It was only released, the Inquisition records against the Templars are only released to the public in 2007. 2007? Shouldn't it have been before that time? Yeah. Wow. Yes, because it's so embarrassing. Yeah, and you can buy the whole copy if you want for about 5,900 euros. In this work, by the way, Clement actually asserts in this work that's finally released in 2007, Clement, he actually said this, that the Knights Templar were not guilty of heresy. Only a few were guilty for some minor crimes. As it turned out, the spitting on the cross was intended to be a ritual of obedience in case Muslims captured them. Oh, no. Now we have one more group, actually 2.5, but we got to talk about this one. You want to hear this? What about an early movement of Christian women? What about that? In the early 12th century, many women began to seek an independent spiritual life based upon prayer and caring for others, but they did not take vows or alms, and were free to charge for whatever they made. This movement began in what is now the Netherlands and Belgium. Soon these women began to band together to become, because of their common goals, they formed collectives, and they are called binguages, each under a grand mistress, having their own unique rule, and often focus upon a particular means of living. Let's take a look at the Beguines a little bit. The Beguines. So cloth making was very, very popular. There we go. Amongst these establishments in Flanders, quite a few of these Beguines were considered holy women, inspiring mystics believed to be close to God through their devotions. Let's go to the next image. By the 13th century, the Beguine culture was further diversified with increasingly more upon a life of mysticism as opposed to an individual or collective labor. And so it resulted in them maybe begging to support and wanting to do contemplative life full time. Now, this starts to cause a problem. You see, and also they join the Franciscans. They become part of the third rule of St. Francis, and they have a little kinship with those known as the spiritual Franciscans. But here's the problem. The Beguines, through their mysticism, got these visions and ideas and dreams and that flowed through them, said to be from God. And this was understood by many as authoritative. But this authority was looked at this time as challenging church authority. Challenging church authority. And now that they're doing it full time from the perspective of the church, this was even worse from their perspective. And so the Beguines, by the early 14th century, were in trouble with the church for many reasons. By the way, they're also not part of any official order, just this lay movement of the third rule of St. Francis. There was no way to correct their theological innovations. They were so independent, they were free spirits. One by the name of Marguerite Porte was burned at the stake in Paris in 1310 for her very independent ways. By 1311, Pope Clement V accused the Beguines of spreading heresy, destabilizing the church, and just all other kinds of mischief. So Pope John the 22nd, 1316 to 1334, also viewed the lay movement of the Beguines as troublesome because of their zeal and their theological creativity, and it was becoming a home movement, this homespun religious movement that was spreading all over, and women were joining it. So, of course, the spiritual Franciscans were very popular amongst the Beguines. So when Rome began to persecute the Franciscans, guess who helped out the spiritual Franciscans? The Beguines, who were often a member of the third order of St. Francis. They protected their fellow brethren, Like the spiritual Franciscans, the Beguines believed in living a very simple life, modeling St. Francis and helping the poor. For them, Olivia was a saint as much as St. Francis was. So when Pope John 22nd began to arrest the spiritual Franciscans and put them under the Inquisition as of 1317, and then proceeded to burn them, the spiritual Franciscans, at the stake as a result of the Inquisition in 1318, the Beguines began to hide the spiritualists in their homes. We want to protect them from persecution. In fact, they started to sneak them out of France via Majorca to Sicily, where they knew they would be safe. In response, John the 22nd decided to arrest the Beguines of southern France and likewise charge them of heresy. So they were now being burned at the stake. A certain Laresse Bisset was arrested, placed under the Inquisition, and admitted that she was in charge of one of the base points along the coast where the Beguines were smuggling the spiritualists, the Franciscans, to Sicily. In fact, she said that she helped 6 such men, and one of them being her cousin. Why, what's going on here? What's happening here is you have this almost like this underground railroad idea where the spiritual Franciscans are being snuck from point to point to get them out of France. Meanwhile, of course, obviously the spiritual Franciscans were eventually faded out for a while, but they've actually come back. Of course, you have under the Inquisition, you have Jan Hus, was also found himself under the Inquisition, right? And then the Catholic Church created a very organized demonology in relation to, well, witchcraft, revealing their supposed improprieties and outlining how the remedies they believed went against the laws of God. So guess what? The Inquisition machine was already attacking Cathars and Waldensians, and attacking Knights Templars and spiritual Franciscans and Beguines. So just why not add witches to that list? So now this is the next list. And yes, the Dominicans are still in charge. And so in the official capacity, edicts began to appear against witchcraft. I want to say something about the word witchcraft. The word is malficia or malficium, and the idea is doing malficium, doing evil acts, bad magic. So whenever you see the word witchcraft translated for the continent, that's not the word. The word witch is not in the languages of the continent, right? So what will be, of course, is that we'll use the word malficia, right? Or they use the German word hexa. So you got to be very careful. The word witch is used for English, right? So it's used in areas where they speak English. That's where you get the word. So whenever you see the word witch and it's pertaining to the continent, take out that word and put in bad magic or evil deeds or evil actions or evil magic. Put that in instead. So yes, they will accuse women of doing this, but they're not calling themselves witches in that place. Another tradition. Got it? Okay, but still I'm going to use for convenience sake. So it's against those who are practitioners of malficium. So what will happen is, in official capacity, edicts began to appear against malficia. I'll use the word malficia, with the most sophisticated possibly being the papal bull issued by Pope Innocent the VIII for parts of the Holy Roman Empire. Let's go to the next image. I think we have a few more. This is a beautiful Beguine. This is like one of their associates that's still there. Go to the next image. Is there any more? Is that the last image? Okay, that's it. Okay, it's fine. We can close down on that then. Thank you. Good job. Thank you so much, Margie. So what happens? We're out of pictures. We're out of luck, right? Okay, so what's going to happen is that there is a document, and it was issued in 1484. It is known as the Summus Desterrantes Effectibus. The entire work was the work of 2 Dominican inquisitors, of course, right? The most prominent being Heinrich Kramer, who lived from 1430 to 1505, who is the General Inquisitor of Salzburg, Tyrol, Bohemia, and Moravia, while the other was the lesser-known Jakob Sprenger. A high degree of ignorance and local superstition really does permeate this text. For instance, at one point, this bull declares, many persons of both sexes, mindful of their own salvation and straying from the Catholic faith, have abandoned themselves to devils, incubi, and succubi, and by their incantations, spells, conjurations, and other accused charms and crafts, enormities and horrid offenses, have slain infants, yet in the mother's womb, as also the offspring of cattle, have blasted the produce of the earth, the grapes of the vine, the fruits of the tree, nay, men and women, beasts of burden, herd beasts, as well as animals of other kinds, vineyards, orchards, meadows, pasture land, corn, wheat, and all other cereals. These wretches furthermore afflict and torment men and women, beasts of burden, herd bursts, as well as animals of other kinds with terrible and piteous pains and sore diseases, both internal and external. They hinder men from performing the sexual act and women from conceiving, whence husbands cannot know their wives, nor wives receive their husbands. Over and above this, they blaspheme and renounce the faith which is theirs by the sacrament of baptism, and at the instigation of the enemy of mankind, they do not shrink from committing and perpetuating the foulest abominations and filthiest excesses to the deadly peril of their own souls, whereby they outrage the divine majesty and are a cause of scandal and danger to very many. The abominations and enormities in question remain unpunished, not without open danger to the souls of many and the perils of eternal damnation. We are here exactly right. We are there to save your soul. So we're gonna kill you while trying to do that, while trying to protect everybody else. You notice while we're here that the effects of these those who stand condemned are all to do harm within the natural world, with nothing of benefit attributed to them. Hence, there is a very strong sense of maleficium. Does that make sense? This is definitely maleficium, evil deeds. You don't see anything that's connected to good deeds here. So, once again, what's going to happen is when we get to Great Britain, what's going to happen, or I should say England or Wales or Scotland, the result of this will be as follows: that you'll be guilty not because of maleficium by the deeds that you do. You'll be guilty just because you are called, because now use the English word, just because you're called witch. So you're guilty by name, whether you're doing good or bad. But on the continent, you're guilty because you're doing perceived evil magic. But if you are perceiving doing good magic, then according to those documents, what happens is you're not doing magic, you're doing a miracle, and you're doing something good. So, if the person does something and the baby lives, it's a miracle. If the baby dies, you're evil, and you're going to have lots of problems like this. Kepler, right? Kepler's mom, Kepler, obviously, when it comes to his views of astronomy, his mom was one of these ladies who looked at the stars, got him all excited, actually, about looking into the heavens. Even when he's 4 years old, she called him out, "Come out, take a look at the stars." Of course, she put together stars astronomy with astrology, and by the way, Kepler did the same thing. But the point of the matter is that she did local herbs. She's an innkeeper's a daughter. She did various herbs and remedies and so forth. But there's this lady, I think her name is Ursula, which is kind of like as like the Sea Witch from Little Mermaid. What happened is that she accused her of making her sick, and so she gets accused of doing evil magic or maleficium. And so what happens is that the Inquisition comes, they charge her, and they beat her up. She's a mess. Kepler, of course, eventually rescues her, but it's, she gets released, but she dies soon after because of terrible things that they did, because she gave this lady something that made her sick. Now, if she did make her sick, because she made a living doing this, if she didn't get sick, then it'd be like, oh, God's with you. But if the baby dies, like as I said, you're of the devil, if the baby lives, it's a miracle. Really horrible time to live, right? Terrible time. Now, many view the papal bull as politically motivated to empower those associated with the Inquisition. You think, especially the Dominicans, who were more obedient to Pope's wishes over that of the local German Catholic priests, who were often compromised by their allegiance to their localities, especially the local princes. So, hey, we'll just empower the Dominicans in the Inquisition and scare people to see us in authority. While local authorities were threatened with excommunication if they did not comply with these measures, the German nobility did their best to ignore the bull or to enforce it half-heartedly. Well, I guess we need stronger measures. So here it comes. Inquisition, back at it again. The virtually ignored papal bull was followed by another work by the very same Kramer, known as Malleus Maleficarum. Now, I want to say this. This is not, in English, they'll translate it as a hammer of witches. You don't see the word witches there at all. It's Maleficarium, right? So we're once more back to Maleficium. So against the hammer against those who do evil deeds. It was published in 1486, which eventually affected England more directly. When it is translated into English, then they will put the word witch there. But the word there's no witch in Latin. There's no, and the equivalent is evildoer. And of course, once again, hexa is equivalent in German. That's one who does hexes. So by its nature, it's something that's evil. Okay. So what happens, according to Kramer in this work, he says, in the town of Rasenbaum, a certain young man who had was intrigued with a girl, wishing to leave her, I'm just reading, lost his member. That is to say, some glamour was cast over it so that he could not see or touch nothing but his smooth body. In his worry over this, he went to a tavern to drink wine. I guess that's what happens when you discover you lost your member through maybe magic. And after he had sat there for a while, he got into a conversation with another woman who was there and told her the cause of his sadness, explaining everything and demonstrating that he showed his nothing part to her. The woman asked whether he suspected anybody, and he did name somebody, and he told the whole matter. He says, and she said, if persuasion is not enough, you must use some violence to induce her to restore you back to health. So in the evening, the young man watched the way by which the witch was in the habit of going. Once again, this is English translation, so the word witch is there. And finding her, prayed her to restore to him the health of his body. And when she maintained that she was innocent and knew nothing about it, he fell upon her and, winding a towel tightly about her neck, choking her, saying, unless you give me back my health, you shall die at my hands. Then she, being unable to cry out and growing black, said, let me go, I will heal you. The young man then relaxed the pressure of the towel, and the witch touched him with her hand between the thighs, saying, now you have what you desire. And the young man, as he afterwards said plainly, felt, before he had verified it by looking or touching, that his member had been restored by him with a mere touch of the witch, unquote. So there we go. These are just strange little stories that the inquisitors are coming up with. They seem to be getting too much into it. Still, there is a curious loophole. For according to one section, quote, when the person accused of heresy is not found to be one who casts injurious spells of witchcraft, but one who removes them, and in such a case, the procedure will be as follows. The remedies which she uses will either be lawful or unlawful. And if they are lawful, she is not to be judged a witch, but a good Christian. But we have already shown at length what sort of remedies are lawful. This is from part 3, third head, question 34. So what do you think, huh? Yet how was one to be sure if the person was either a witch or Malficia or a good Christian? According to the superstitious Malleus Maleficarum, Kramer lists 4 criteria for deciding in the Inquisition for deciding the presumed guilt as witches. For the first one, he states that there are some who can divine secrets and are able to tell things which they could only know through the revelation of evil spirits. For example, when the injured come to them to be healed, they can discover and make known the cause of their injury, and they can perfectly know this and tell that to them who consults them. Secondly, they sometimes undertake to cure the injury or spell of one person, but will have nothing to do with that of another. So you can cure one, but you can't cure another. That must be somebody who's a witch. For in the diocese of Spires, I've been to Spire, there is a witch, he says, in a certain place called Zonhofen, who, often as she seems to heal many people, confesses that she can in no way heal certain others. And this is for no reason then, as the inhabitants of the place assert, that spells cast on such persons have been so potentially wrought by other witches with the help of devils that the devils themselves cannot remove them. So a devil can't remove a spell done by another devil. So therefore, excuse me, if you can't remove a spell, that's because somebody else, some other witch, had cast a spell on them through another devil, through the devil, and so it can't contradict each other. But if you're a good witch, I mean, sorry, good witch, sorry. If you're a sandwich, no. If you are a good Christian, then it doesn't matter. You can cure anybody because the devil alone. So for the one devil cannot or will not always yield to another. Thirdly, it sometimes happens that they must have some reservation or exception in their cure of such injuries. So he has that. I will kind of skip through that because that's kind of long. Fourthly, they sometimes themselves observe or cause to be observed certain superstitions and ceremonies. For instance, they fix some such time as before sunrise for people to visit them, or they say they cannot heal injuries which were caused beyond the limits of the estate on which they live, or they can only heal 2 or 3 people a year, yet they do not heal them, but only seem to do so by ceasing to injure them. We could add many other considerations as touching the condition of such persons, as that after the lapse of a certain time, they have incurred the reputation of leading a bad and sinful life, or that they are adulteresses, or the survivors from covens of other witches. Therefore, their gift of healing is not derived from God on account of the sanctity of their lives. So much is being looked at the kind of lives they live. If they live good lives, then they may not be of that. So once again, if you take a look at the continent, it's always maleficium. It's always bad deeds, even though a person who's good will get accused of that, and you see how arbitrary that is. And it's a different story again on the Isles. Of course, the Malleus Maleficarium, especially targets the midwives because of their association with natural remedies to aid with childbirth. I'm going to read this again. I'm reading from these inquisitors. Here we must refer incidentally to witch midwives, who surpass all other witches in their crimes, as we have shown in the first part of this work. And the number of them is so great that, as has been found, form their confessions, it is thought that there is scarcely any tiny hamlet in which at least one is not found, and that the magistrates may in some degree meet this danger. They should allow no midwives to practice without having been first sworn as a good Catholic. So if you're a midwife, first sworn as a good Catholic, at the same time observing other safeguards mentioned in the second part of this work. Now, obviously, the political implications become obvious when Kramer focuses on local German lords, asserting that when they become, quote, patrons by omission, quote, unquote, in regards to such wizards and suspects, or to their followers, receivers, defenders, and patrons when they neglect to perform their duties as required by the bishop or the inquisitors, that is, by failing to arrest them, I'm still quoting, by not guarding them carefully when they are arrested, by not taking them to the place within their jurisdiction which have been appointed by them, by not promptly executing the sentence passed upon them, and by other such derelictions of their duty, then of course you're in trouble. Again, this is a power struggle where Cranmer hopes the church authorities will obey without question concerning heresy. This was a very convenient church tactic since so many were believed to oppose the will of the Pope, and they suddenly found themselves as heretics and subjects to the Inquisition. So we're okay. We're at the very last group, and you, of course, want to hear this one, the Spanish Inquisition. Oh, all right. We're doing this. Okay. And then we have a surprise ending. A surprise ending? Yeah. Before we consider the direct causes leading to the expulsion of the Jews of 1492, we must realize that despite all the advances, of individual Jews, the community as a whole, while tolerated, were never fully accepted and integrated into the Christian Spain. For example, this fact is made clear by the Cite Partidas of Alfonso X of Castile, 1252-84. Similar to the Islamic law concerning Christian churches, now no new synagogues could be built, nor beyond minor repairs could they be made, I'm actually reading from it, any larger or raised to any greater height or be painted. And if this occurs, the building shall belong to the main church in the vicinity. So you can't, so basically minor repairs to the synagogue. If you do any more, congratulations, it's a church. The regulations also indulges in restrictions that are more a product of local lore and fantasy than reality, declaring against Jews who make a practice of, quote, stealing children and fastening them to crosses and making images of wax and crucifying them when they cannot obtain children. Oh man, that's pretty bad. However, in many, unquote, in many ways, this piece of legislation is more sympathetic to Jews than Muslims because it makes certain provisions that, yeah, but the Sabbath is still holy. So they can, so as a result, it was forbidden to bring them into court. I'm actually quoting again, on account of debt or arrest them or cause them any other annoyance on that day, on the day of the Sabbath. Well, but there's still problems. The thread for the cause of the Jewish expulsions are many. And of course, obviously, the Inquisition is directly part of it, and the Dominicans. It really is a multi-variegated tapestry of intrigue and miscommunication, as well as misguided efforts to spiritual reform potential wayward Christians. These are all my words, by the way. It's the way I write. I'm sorry. One of these reforming groups was a Dominican order, as I mentioned before, known as the Dominicans. And what happened is that Ramon, a certain Dominican, D. Ponfor, basically outlined an ideal that whereby 10 Jews and Saracens together with 10 friars of religion should learn the holy law, after which they preached our law to other Jews and to the Saracens of our holy faith. However, not all Dominicans subscribe to peaceful pursuits of conversion of the Jews to Christianity. One of them is, so here we go. So, especially, of course, towards the conversos. And so I'm going to kind of skip there because I want to go too much. One of them, thus, in 1391, the Dominican Ferrant Martinez, through his passionate preaching, convinced he's a Dominican, obviously connected, right? Convinced an unruly mob to eliminate their common foe and destroy the Jewish quarter of Sevilla. After 4,000 Jews were slaughtered and even more supposedly converted, becoming conversos, and 23 synagogues destroyed. The anti-Semitic rage spread to this Dominican's own town of Ikja, where he was the archdeacon, and to Carmonia. Subsequently, then terror appeared in Toledo, where all those unwilling to embrace the precepts of Christianity were slain. A certain rabbi by the name of Judah, from the proud line of Rabbi Asher Yao, says, quote, slit the throats. He actually basically slit the throats of his wife and children, and then his own, rather than convert. This is from the source, The Expulsion, 1492, Chronicle number 4. Eventually, after Catalonia and even the Balearic Islands, over 70 Jewish communities were destroyed, with 50,000 Jews slaughtered and over 100,000 supposedly converted over to Christianity, obviously using the Inquisition. In fact, when the Jews encountered another radical Dominican, Ferrer, which I mentioned earlier, he had another attack as well. In fact, there's mention of one Castilian city to the other with a torch in one arm and crucifix in the other. He led hostile mobs throughout the place. This is pretty messed up. I mean, I want to abbreviate this a little bit. You get the point. It's more blood and more gore. Since the first generation of conversos were brought to the baptismal font with a knife at their throats, the genuine nature of true conversion was always in question, and for the most part, the new Christians in pre-expulsion Spain were Christian in name, but not so in spirit, many wanting to return to the religion of their Jewish forefathers. So what will happen is, not that every converso retained their Jewish faith, some of them radically became, to prove their faith, radically became part of the persecution. We have actually a list of many Jews like Yahshua Halorki, who became active in persecuting his own people. Okay, so I'm moving to more stuff here, drinking here. Okay, so here we go. Inquisition. What happens now is, according to Autos de Fe, contains many descriptions of this Inquisition. It intensified according to the charter of the expulsion of the Jews after 1480. It ordered to cleanse those suspect Christians from their Judaizing activities. The reconciled were then marched after the Inquisition. They were marched in procession to the local cathedral, both men and women. It said, without cloaks, bareheaded, barefoot, and holding an unlit candle in their hands. The public disgrace was agonizing, and many went shrieking with pain and weeping, tearing out their hair, according to this source from that time, February 12th, 1486. After hearing their heretical crimes, it was ordered that as long as they should live, they could hold no public office, nor could they be money changers, apothecaries, or spice merchants, or will silk, or fine scarlet wool, or colored clothing, or gold, or silver. Of course, the irony is that these were many of the traditional trades of the Jews in Spain. Those who did not repent were paraded on foot, I'm reading from the source, and with canonical mitres on their heads, and with their hands tied to the back of their necks with a piece of rope. They were brought to a tiered platform where their crimes were heard, and then brought to a plain where they were burned, unquote. Again, the source from August. Now, this one source from August of 1486. So you're hearing this directly. The Inquisition trials were often a mess and filled with neighborhood gossip and local animosity against certain individuals. In the case of Inés Lopez, she was tried twice by the Inquisition, 1495 to 96 and 1511, 1512. She believed she was accused of Judaism because many of her neighbors stole from her. 2 pieces of ribbon in the case of Teresa Munoz, or were offended by what she said, like revealing the local holy woman, Juana Torres had given birth out of wedlock to a son and a daughter. So what happens to her original sentence? Inez Lopez could be heard explaining, she says, according to the records, see how my life hangs on the words of a drunken man or a drunken woman? Unquote. So she was tried for observing some Jewish fasts and holidays and for having, quote, little desire to eat pork. Inez Lopez claimed she had only, quote, been reconciled so that they wouldn't burn her at the stake, as they did to her sister. And even though she believed she had never done any of those things that were attributed to her, hoped that the Lord would preserve her from false witness. She was, anyway, found guilty, burned at the stake anyway. Under this kind of pressure, it only became expected that the inquisitors mentioned by Ferdinand and Isabella found so many guilty of Judaism that they felt action had to be taken to stop this problem. Also, of course, you're going to have the dealing out of various badges, yellow badges to identify Jews. That will be another thing that will be issued out in Spain. I want to bring that up. And so in the charter for the expulsion of the Jews of 1492, the 2 Spanish monarchs list various reasons why they believe the Jews should leave Spain. However, the main reason was the fact that Christians, quote, engaged in and continued to engage in social interaction and communication with Jews. Furthermore, they believe the Jews, quote, seek always and by whatever means and ways they can to subvert and to steal faithful Christians from our holy Catholic faith, unquote. Therefore, they felt that in order to prohibit all interactions between Jews and Christians, I'm still reading from it, that there will be not a place where they further offend our holy faith and corrupt those who God until now most desire to preserve. They need to be removed, the principal cause of the problem, and banish the Jews from the kingdom. Wow. So this is just a terrible thing. The deep anguish of this action causes Jews, which is beyond description. In Judah Abravanel's heartfelt poem to his son, he tells of his separation from his son, he in Italy and his son, because of the force of circumstance in Portugal. He cries out against fate and time, who, quote, with his pointed shafts has hit my heart and split my gut, landed me a blow that will not heal, unquote. However, he exhorts his son to stay true to his traditions, including, quote, learning scripture, conning the commentators, memorizing the Mishnah, reasoning out the Talmud with the 13 principles, unquote. Judah is also concerned with his family legacy as a scholar. He says, to whom will I hand my scholarship? To whom can I pour the nectar of my vines? Who will taste and eat of all my learning, of my books when I am gone? That's so sad. So awful. Sorry, it choked up here. And life was not easy for the Jews as they received a rather lukewarm reception by many of the surrounding kingdoms. In the case of Ferdinand, King of Naples, while his reception was hospitable, his people were less than pleased, especially since an epidemic began to spread amongst the Jews and then began to spread to the rest of the population. Now the word began to spread that wherever the Jews went, they brought plague with them, and as they would, quote, kill them and their children. It says Elijah Capselli in his minor order to Elijah 71 to 20. Elijah still believed God was in control and felt that whoever would seek to harm the Jews would be punished, as did to the persecuting Don Juan of Portugal, who died in great agony and childless. Yet the Ottomans, so the Jews had nowhere to go. So who received these Jews who were expelled, who were thrown out of Spain, right? Thrown out, cast out. The Muslims did. The Ottomans received the Jews with favor. And Elijah believed God blessed them for this act of love. He declares, we thought that the exile was bad, but God saw it as good. And maybe, sorry, choked me. Sorry. Indeed, it was just for this that we were banished and that the salvation began in the year 1492. For we all gathered together, excuse me, to be ready for the ultimate gathering of all the exiles. The reason why I'm choking up is these are Jews and Muslims working together in love. And then I think about what's going on right now in the Middle East. That's what chokes me up. So, so it was possible at one time, right? Okay, Elijah held firm his conviction that God has begun to gather together the scattered ones of his people so that they will be ready for the coming of the Messiah. He declared he cannot tarry much longer. And you're thinking, where does it? So at this point, we're gonna wrap things up. I want to go a few places more, not that many. We're done, but I want to say the Inquisition. What happens is Dominicans are in charge up to the 1500s, and then Dominicans are in charge at times, but sometimes it depends on location. Sometimes the Jesuits are thrown into this. Obviously, never the Franciscans. So you have Inquisition courts, yes, in Spain and Portugal, but also goes into the New World. It goes into Africa. It goes to Asia. Did you know there's an Inquisition in India, in Goa, of the Portuguese, starting in 1560? It was a persecution of the Hindus. And during this persecution, this Inquisition, this is the Inquisition, same format, same everything else. They destroyed the Hindu temples. They burned any books in Sanskrit, but also Dutch and English. They focused on the new converts to Christianity to keep them from returning to Hinduism. The movement was started in 1560. What happens is that non-Christians, they ordered, cannot hold public office. Hindus cannot produce any Christian devotional objects or symbols. Hindus cannot be witnesses in legal procedures at Goa. What they do, though, is very interesting, is they equate Hinduism with Maleficia. In our translations, we'll say witchcraft in English. So if you're a Hindu, you're practicing Maleficia. And so therefore, all the wheels that we learned before, right, against witches, against the Maleficia, will now apply and move in to Goa and the surrounding areas where the Portuguese are having control in India. In fact, having something written in Sanskrit or the local Konkani language was now a capital offense. And at the same time, some Sephardic Jews then arrived in Goa. Guess what? The Portuguese then applied that Inquisition against the Jews. Now the Jews are persecuted in India by the Inquisition. How many people were tried by the Inquisition in India, in Goa? 16,172. Between 1560 to 1774, 3/4 of them were natives. Then it was suspended for a short period of time from 1774 to 1778. And from 1778, it continued on all the way to 1812. 1812. The Inquisition also went to Peru, the Peru Inquisition, right? 1570 to 1820, targeting Jews and Muslims and Lutherans. There's the Mexican Inquisition from 1571 to 1820. The last one that was tried by the Inquisition outside of the papal state, I said outside of the papal state, tried and executed. So the last person executed by the Inquisition outside of the papal state happened in 1826. The last one killed, 1826. It's Gaeta Ripoll. Gaeta Ripoll, he was the last one executed in Spain because he was teaching deism. He was hanged. He was a schoolmaster. And he basically, as a schoolmaster, he didn't have reverence for the sacrament. He didn't see Mass was necessary for salvation. And so the clergy requested that he would be burned alive at the stake. But the civil authority chose to hang him instead. The church authorities were so upset because he wasn't burned. He needs to be burned. He's a deist, for heaven's sakes, you know. So what they did is that when he was dead, they placed his body in a barrel and they painted flames on the barrel. They painted flames in the barrel, and then they buried him on unconsecrated ground. So that way, technically, he was burned. So what happened? I said, so the Inquisition pretty much stopped in the 1820s, except for the Papal State. What do you mean? This is my conclusion. So what happens is that it was abolished, except for the Papal State, and the Inquisition now becomes part of what's called the Roman Curia. By the way, hardly anybody knows this. The Roman Curia. The Inquisition kept going in the Roman Curia. Yes. And of course, following the precept earlier on, of course, of Pope Paul III, which will still be used for a long time. How long, you'll see. Pope Paul III says on July 21st, 1542, he says that this institution is to defend Catholic faith from heresy, spread sound Catholic doctrine, and defend those points of Christian tradition which seem in danger because of new and unacceptable doctrines, unquote. This becomes the big motto. And so it becomes part of the Roman Curia, this Inquisition. Then it's renamed. It's renamed the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office. What year? 1908. What? Then it's renamed again. And it's called the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. When did they rename that? In 1965. And then they rename it again. The Dicastery, that's Dicastery, for the Doctrine of Faith. When is that named that? 2022. Ooh. The headquarters, of course, is the Palace of the Holy Office. It still operates today, investigates crimes against the Eucharist. It investigates crimes against penance. It persecutes, of course, goes against crimes of adultery and other offenses and heresies within the church. But with one interesting qualification. It doesn't go for those outside of the church. So just those within the church. And no longer is death or torture part of it. That's good news, right? No death or torture, just expulsion. In fact, it kind of sets back the clock back to the way it was before we get to the time of the Cathars. So it sets back the clock so that, you get in trouble. Also, they work with civic authorities. One good thing they do is they're the ones that empower against priests who commit adultery, specifically for those who are under 18 years of age. So what they're doing is they switch things around. And so this is part of the arm that's disciplining the priests for their various actions. That's a big controversy bit. But little did you know that it's part of this particular legacy. That's where it comes from. I just told you all the names all the way through. But when it comes to the way it administers things, it sets back the clock before the time of the Cathars, where it's about people who are from within the church as opposed to forcing those from without the church, beyond the church. And also, if you are a layperson who's a heretic, it doesn't go, it's focused more on those people who are clerics. So it's more focused. You guys got it? But still, there is that legacy. So we have just gone over. I know I like positive talks. I love positive talks. This is a very dark topic, but it does have to be known. It does have to be understood. It does have to be deciphered. It does have to be interpreted. It does need to be communicated. And so that's what I'm doing here. You had noticed that this entire talk, I'd say about 70 to 80% of this talk were quotes from that time or from people from that time or excerpts from those histories just put together. So you literally heard from the inquisitors and you heard from those who were persecuted, and you can understand what happened and the perceptions behind it. And so much is about, yes, the Inquisition was absolutely 100% corrupt right from its inception. There's no way around it. It is corrupt. It also goes against so many ideas that were intrinsically part of even early Christianity. But I'll go further. It was also a political tool. That's what it is. It's the papacy's political tool in order to try to retain power in Europe over kings, right? Over lords, and princes, and nobility. This is their way of doing it. Creating fear that you are going to be charged as a heretic if you do not follow what we say and what we do, if you don't conform to our way of thinking, because we want to keep you in the church, because we want to stay in power. But also, it's about economics. It's about, hey, we can use the Inquisition to gather more revenue. They win. They get, what happens is if you're accused, your property's taken away. In some cases, like obviously the church gets it, but in some cases, as we found out, the state gets it, but other people get it. So it is advantageous. It's also a social movement of power, of control, because the idea is that it stifles independent thinking. It stifles. Think of all these groups that want just to do their own thing. It's like, no, you have to believe what we believe. You can't think outside the box. You can't have this dualistic system. You can't have the Bible in the vernacular. You can't. On and on. You can't. As women, you can't have power through mystical gifts that seems to go against our authority. We can't have, and of course, obviously, we go into the Jews and others and everything. It is one of the saddest stories, and it is, I have to say, one of the greatest and darkest black eyes on the church and its institutions, and says what happens when a religious institution has too much power. The old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. It does absolutely apply to this. And there needs to be apologies, obviously, and there has been, but we still need to have it coming. And we still need to have this information more public in many ways. So is there something positive that comes out of this? Is there anything? Yes, there is. We survived, right? Yes, we survived. Not all of them survived. Well, actually, the Templars, they survived. They ended up becoming connected to the Knights of John. They go to Portugal, and their orders still exist. There are not very many of them left, but their Templars do survive. Pretty much, a lot of them could be absorbed by the Hospitallers. So I guess that didn't really survive. But the Beguines didn't survive. The spiritual Franciscans did survive. The Waldensians by a hair, but they did survive. Protestant movement survived. Yeah, last I checked, right? So and yes, the Jews survived. And so it is a story of survival, that we got through these hard times, that is always darkest before the dawn. And that brings up one other point, and that is a lot of things are happening during the 1600s. And after the 30-year War of the Holy Roman Empire, after that point, people are exhausted. People are done. People are done fighting wars on behalf of religion. So already, the writings on the wall, even when it comes to church authority, even as early as the 1600s. And of course, obviously, that leads to these revolutions as we get into the 1700s and the 1800s. So so what we learn is that towards the end, these kind of powers hold on even more tightly, even more strongly than ever before, because they know they are going to lose. They know their time is up. They know the winds of change are happening. And so they will fight, they will claw, and the Inquisition is that last gasp towards the end, and it's over. Darkest before the dawn. Thank you so much for being here. Whew.